An Animal's History of Humanity, A Brief History on the Exploitation of Animals, by Jeffries. Chapter 1. The Stone Age, When Kinship Became Conquest. The spear trembled in Kala's weathered hands as she crouched behind the boulder, watching the mammoth calf struggle in the mud pit her clan had spent days preparing. Its mother trumpeted despairingly from the cliff edge above, too massive to descend the narrow path. The calf's dark eyes, intelligent, terrified, met hers for a moment across the killing ground. In that instant, perhaps 20,000 years ago on the windswept steppes of what would become France, humanity crossed an invisible threshold. We stopped seeing animals as kin and began seeing them as resources. This transformation didn't emerge from necessity alone. Archaeological evidence reveals that early humans possessed extensive knowledge of plant foods and sophisticated processing techniques that could have sustained them. Yet they consistently chose the path of greater violence, developing what would become history's most efficient system of interspecies domination. The Stone Age, spanning 3 million years from the first stone tools to the dawn of agriculture, chronicles humanity's deliberate choice to prioritize conquest over coexistence. The vast expanse of the Stone Age was not a monolithic period, but rather a dynamic era of escalating exploitation. Early hominins like Homo habilis and Homo erectus initially scavenged and hunted opportunistically, much like other predatory species. But something fundamental shifted as these early humans developed increasingly sophisticated methods of killing, trapping, and utilizing animal resources. These weren't mere technological advances. They represented a growing understanding of how to systematically dominate other species for maximum human benefit. What began as survival strategy evolved into ideology. By the time modern humans emerged, hunting had become a cornerstone of identity, spiritual practice, and social organization. The innovations, techniques, and attitudes developed during this era would establish patterns of animal exploitation that persist today. Regional variations, a global system of exploitation. The development of hunting techniques varied significantly across different geographical regions, but the underlying pattern remained consistent. Wherever humans spread, they developed increasingly efficient methods of animal exploitation tailored to local conditions. These regional variations showcase not just human adaptability, but the universal human drive to establish dominance over other species, regardless of environmental challenges. In the Arctic regions, early human populations faced extreme conditions that might have encouraged cooperation with local wildlife. Instead, they developed some of the most sophisticated hunting technologies known to archaeology. The Dorset culture, flourishing in the Canadian Arctic around 500 BCE to 1500 CE, perfected the art of hunting seals through breathing holes in sea ice, a technique requiring incredible patience, precision, and understanding of marine mammal behavior. Archaeological evidence from sites like Alarnurk in Nunavut reveals tools specifically designed for Arctic hunting: ice picks for enlarging breathing holes, toggle head harpoons that would lock inside wounded animals, and specialized snow knives for building hunting blinds. These weren't adaptations born of desperation, but sophisticated technologies that allowed humans to extract resources from one of Earth's most challenging environments. The pursuit of larger Arctic marine mammals demonstrates the escalating ambition of human hunters. Evidence suggests that early Arctic peoples developed techniques for hunting walruses and whales, animals that posed significant dangers to hunters but offered enormous resource rewards. The social organization required for such hunts, involving dozens of participants and complex logistical planning, indicates that communities were willing to invest enormous effort in animal exploitation, even when smaller, safer prey was available. Tropical rainforest environments presented different challenges, but human responses followed similar patterns of technological escalation. In Southeast Asian forests, evidence from sites like Naya Cave in Borneo, dating to 40,000 years ago, shows that early inhabitants developed hunting techniques for the complex three-dimensional environment of forest canopies. They hunted primates, The use of poison in hunting represents a particularly significant development in human predation. Unlike natural predators, which rely on physical attributes for killing, humans began using chemical weapons that could kill animals without direct confrontation. This required detailed knowledge of plant chemistry, animal physiology, and dose calculation. Essentially, early humans became the first species to develop biological warfare. In the grasslands and savannas of Africa, where human ancestors first evolved, hunting techniques developed along different trajectories that reveal our species' departure from its ecological origins. Evidence from Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, spanning nearly 2 million years, documents the evolution from opportunistic scavenging to systematic hunting of large herds. By 300,000 years ago, sites like Olagasaili in Kenya show evidence of projectile point technology and coordinated group hunts. The archaeological record reveals that early humans in these environments developed techniques for hunting zebra, wildebeest, and other herd animals that required sophisticated understanding of animal migration patterns and social structures. Rather than adapting to fit into existing ecological niches, humans consistently developed technologies that allowed them to dominate ecosystems where they evolved. Australia presents perhaps the most dramatic example of human hunting impact. When humans first arrived around 65,000 years ago, they encountered a continent populated by megafauna that had evolved without mammalian predators. Giant wombats, diprotodon, massive kangaroos, and marsupial lions had no behavioral defenses against human hunting techniques developed in other continents. Archaeological sites like Cuddy Springs in New South Wales preserve evidence of human interactions with these now extinct species. Within a few thousand years of human arrival, 88% of Australia's large mammal species had disappeared. The speed of these extinctions, combined with evidence of human hunting sites, suggests that indigenous Australians developed techniques specifically adapted for hunting megafauna that had never faced such predatory pressure. The use of fire. European hunting practices during the Stone Age reflect adaptations to changing climatic conditions, but consistently prioritize human needs over animal welfare. Neanderthal sites, such as Schöningen, demonstrate that even 300,000 years ago, European early humans were capable of manufacturing sophisticated wooden weapons for hunting large, dangerous animals like aurochs and rhinoceroses. During the Upper Paleolithic, Cro-Magnon populations developed even more elaborate hunting techniques. Sites like Salutre in France contain the remains of over 100,000 horses, killed over thousands of years in coordinated cliff drives. The scale of such operations indicates that hunting had become a central organizing principle of human society, requiring complex social coordination and seasonal planning. The Americas witnessed rapid development of hunting technologies as human populations spread across 2 continents. The Clovis culture, emerging around 13,000 years ago, is associated with distinctive fluted projectile points that appear simultaneously across North America, suggesting rapid spread of highly effective killing technology. Sites like Blackwater Draw in New Mexico preserve evidence of Clovis mammoth hunting, while discoveries at Monteverde in Chile show that early South Americans developed diverse hunting strategies, targeting animals from marine mammals to forest deer. The speed with which humans colonized the Americas, combined with the rapid extinction of most large mammal species, suggests that hunting techniques were so effective that they outpaced the ability of animal populations to adapt. Coastal regions worldwide saw development of marine hunting techniques that extended human predation into oceanic environments. Evidence from Huaca Prieta in Peru, dating to 14,000 years ago, shows that early coastal peoples were skilled at hunting marine mammals and large fish. Shell middens found globally, such as those in Denmark from the Mesolithic period, demonstrate that humans quickly learned to exploit marine resources with the same systematic efficiency they applied to terrestrial hunting. The consistency of these regional patterns reveals something troubling about human nature. Regardless of environment, available prey, or survival pressures, humans consistently developed increasingly sophisticated methods of animal exploitation. This wasn't adaptation driven by necessity, but a pattern of behavior that suggests an inherent drive toward interspecies domination. The technology of suffering, trapping, and fishing. Beyond direct hunting, prehistoric humans developed sophisticated systems of trapping and fishing that demonstrate calculated planning to cause animal suffering for human benefit. These techniques reveal a level of premeditation that distinguishes human predation from natural hunting behaviors. The deliberate construction of mechanisms designed to capture, injure, and kill animals without human presence. Archaeological evidence suggests that pit traps were among the earliest forms of mechanized killing. These weren't simple holes, but carefully engineered death machines, excavated to precise depths, often lined with sharpened stakes, and camouflaged with vegetation to ensure unsuspecting animals would fall to their deaths. Sites across Europe and North America contain evidence of trap systems that required weeks of labor to construct and maintain. The psychological implications of pit trap construction are particularly disturbing. Unlike direct hunting, which involves immediate confrontation between predator and prey, traps required humans to imagine animals suffering in advance and deliberately design mechanisms to maximize that suffering. The placement of sharpened stakes wasn't accidental. Archaeological evidence shows these were positioned to cause maximum damage to falling animals, ensuring death even if the initial fall wasn't fatal. Snare technology represents another form of premeditated animal suffering. Evidence from multiple Stone Age sites indicates that humans developed increasingly sophisticated rope and wire systems designed to strangle animals slowly. Unlike natural predation, which typically results in relatively quick death, snares were specifically designed to cause prolonged suffering as animals struggled against tightening restraints. The construction of deadfall traps reveals similar patterns of calculated cruelty. These devices used heavy stones or logs triggered by animal movement to crush prey. But archaeological evidence suggests they were often designed to maim rather than kill immediately. This would prevent escape while keeping meat fresh until hunters could arrive to finish the killing process. Fish trapping techniques demonstrate how humans applied systematic exploitation even to aquatic environments. Weirs, barriers constructed across streams and rivers, represented some of humanity's first attempts at industrial-scale animal killing. These structures forced fish into confined areas where they could be easily captured, often resulting in mass deaths during spawning seasons when fish were most vulnerable. The development of fish traps made from woven materials shows sophisticated understanding of animal behavior, combined with deliberate exploitation of that knowledge. These traps were designed to allow easy entry, but prevent escape, essentially creating underwater prisons where fish would slowly starve or suffocate. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites indicates that such traps could capture hundreds of fish simultaneously, far exceeding immediate food needs. Fishing techniques evolved to include increasingly sophisticated tools designed to cause maximum suffering. Early harpoons, evidenced from sites like Katanda in the Democratic Republic of Congo, dating to 90,000 years ago, were designed with barbed points that would lodge permanently in fish flesh, making escape impossible, and ensuring prolonged agony before death. The development of nets represents another escalation in fishing technology that prioritized human convenience over animal welfare. Evidence suggests that early humans created nets capable of capturing entire schools of fish simultaneously, often resulting in mass deaths when catches exceeded processing capacity. This technique demonstrates a willingness to waste animal lives for the convenience of reducing hunting time. Hook and line fishing, while appearing more individual than net fishing, actually represents a form of psychological torture applied to aquatic animals. Fish caught on hooks experience prolonged stress as they struggle against the line, often suffering severe injuries to The evolution of fishing spears shows increasing sophistication in causing fish mortality. Early spears were simple pointed sticks, but archaeological evidence reveals development of multi-pronged spears designed to increase chances of striking fish while causing multiple wounds that would prevent escape, even if the initial strike wasn't immediately fatal. Seasonal fishing practices demonstrate how humans learned to exploit animal vulnerability for maximum killing efficiency. Evidence indicates that early peoples deliberately timed fishing expeditions to coincide with spawning seasons, when fish were concentrated, vulnerable, and focused on reproduction rather than escape. This represents conscious decision-making to target animals during their most defenseless moments. The construction of fish dams shows how humans began modifying entire ecosystems to facilitate animal exploitation. These structures altered natural water flow patterns, often destroying spawning habitats while concentrating fish in artificial killing zones. Archaeological evidence suggests that such modifications could affect entire river systems, demonstrating willingness to cause ecological damage for the convenience of easier fishing. Ice fishing techniques developed in northern regions reveal how humans adapted their exploitation methods to different environmental conditions. Evidence from Arctic sites shows sophisticated understanding of fish behavior under ice, combined with development of specialized tools for accessing and extracting fish from frozen environments. The effort required to maintain ice fishing operations during winter months indicates that animal exploitation had become so central to human identity that people would endure extreme hardship to continue killing other species. The development of poison fishing in tropical regions represents perhaps the most disturbing innovation in aquatic animal exploitation. Evidence suggests that early peoples discovered plant toxins that could be introduced into water systems to stun or kill fish over large areas. This technique required sophisticated knowledge of plant chemistry and aquatic ecosystems, knowledge that was then used to cause mass fish deaths rather than ecological understanding. The complete utilization from tools to torture devices. The systematic utilization of animal remains by Stone Age humans reveals a level of efficiency that transformed every part of a killed animal into human utility, suggesting that early peoples viewed animals not as individual beings, but as collections of raw materials to be completely consumed for human purposes. This comprehensive exploitation required detailed anatomical knowledge and sophisticated processing techniques that indicate hunting and killing were planned with full awareness of how each animal part would be used. Bone utilization reaches levels of efficiency that would impress modern manufacturers. Long bones from large mammals like mammoths and bison were systematically processed into spear points, awls, needles, and scrapers. Archaeological evidence from sites like Kostenki in Russia, dating to 40,000 years ago, shows that humans had developed standardized techniques for converting bones into tools, with evidence of specialized workshops where bone processing was conducted on an industrial scale. The creation of bone needles represents a particularly sophisticated form of animal exploitation. These tools, some of the earliest evidence dating to 50,000 years ago, required precise drilling techniques and careful shaping to create functional implements. The effort invested in creating such delicate tools from animal bones indicates that humans had moved far beyond subsistence hunting to develop craft specialization based on animal exploitation. Antler processing reveals even more complex utilization patterns. The Magdalenian culture, flourishing between 17,000 and 12,000 years ago, developed techniques for carving antlers into hammers, picks, pressure flakers, and decorative objects. Archaeological evidence indicates that antler processing required specialized knowledge of material properties and sophisticated carving techniques that represent significant time investment in animal exploitation activities. Skull utilization demonstrates perhaps the most psychologically disturbing aspect of Stone Age animal processing. Evidence from Gauve's Cave in England shows that 12,000 years ago, humans were converting animal skulls into drinking cups and bowls. The systematic processing of smaller bones into fishing equipment, jewelry, and musical instruments reveals how animal exploitation extended beyond mere survival needs into aesthetic and recreational activities. Archaeological sites contain evidence of bone beads, pendants, and other decorative items that required significant time investment to create. This suggests that killing animals had become so routine that humans had surplus animal materials available for non-essential purposes. Hide processing represents another area where Stone Age humans developed sophisticated techniques that required intimate knowledge of animal anatomy and decomposition processes. Evidence indicates that early peoples developed chemical treatments using plant materials and ash to preserve animal skins, techniques that required experimentation and specialized knowledge passed down through generations. The creation of leather goods from animal hides shows increasing sophistication in animal exploitation. The Iceman, preserved in ice for 5,300 years, wore clothing made from at least 5 different animal species: deer, bear, sheep, goat, and cattle. The precision with which these materials were combined indicates that leather working had become a specialized craft, requiring detailed knowledge of different animal skin properties. The development of leather containers, bags, and footwear demonstrates how animal exploitation had expanded beyond immediate survival needs to support increasingly complex human lifestyles. Archaeological evidence suggests that leather goods were being traded over long distances, indicating that animal exploitation had become integrated into early economic systems. Musical instrument creation from animal parts reveals how humans incorporated animal suffering into cultural and recreational activities. The Holfels flute, carved from a vulture wing bone 43,000 years ago, represents one of humanity's earliest artistic achievements, created from the remains of a killed animal. This pattern of using animal parts for entertainment and cultural expression indicates that animal exploitation had become so normalized that it extended into all aspects of human life. The systematic collection and processing of animal teeth and claws for decorative purposes shows how humans began using animal parts as symbols of status and achievement. Archaeological sites contain evidence of perforated animal teeth arranged in patterns that suggest they were worn as necklaces or sewn onto clothing. The time investment required to create such decorations indicates that displaying animal remains had become important for human social identity. Bone marrow extraction techniques reveal sophisticated understanding of animal anatomy, combined with efficient resource utilization. Evidence from multiple sites shows that humans developed specialized tools for cracking bones and extracting marrow, often processing bones so thoroughly that modern archaeologists have difficulty identifying the original animal species. This level of processing efficiency suggests that maximizing extraction of resources from killed animals had become a priority that drove technological development. The creation of composite tools using multiple animal parts demonstrates how human exploitation had become so systematic that different animals were killed specifically for their unique material properties. Evidence shows spears created with wooden shafts, stone points, and sinew bindings taken from different animals, indicating that hunting had evolved into a supply chain operation, where different species were targeted for specific body parts. Tool maintenance and repair using animal materials reveals how ongoing animal exploitation was required to sustain human technology. Archaeological evidence shows that stone tools were regularly resharpened and rehafted using animal materials, indicating that successful human communities required continuous access to freshly killed animals, not just for food, but for maintaining their technological systems. Climate change and the intensification of slaughter. The dramatic climate fluctuations of the Pleistocene epoch created environmental pressures that, rather than encouraging human adaptation to changing conditions, instead drove the development of increasingly intensive animal exploitation techniques. As ice sheets advanced and retreated across continents, Early humans responded not by reducing their environmental impact, but by developing. During the last glacial maximum, approximately 26,500 to 19,000 years ago, vast ice sheets covered much of North America and Europe, creating harsh steppe environments where large mammals like mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses struggled to survive. Rather than reducing hunting pressure during these difficult periods, archaeological evidence suggests that human communities intensified their exploitation of these vulnerable animals. The contraction of suitable habitat during glacial periods concentrated both human and animal populations into smaller areas, creating opportunities for more intensive hunting. Sites like Predmostie in the Czech Republic, dating to around 26,000 years ago, contain the remains of over 1,000 mammoths, indicating that humans had developed techniques for systematically hunting these animals, even during the harshest climatic conditions. As temperatures began to rise around 14,700 years ago, during the Berling-Allerød interstadial, environmental changes accelerated rapidly. Pollen records from European lake sediments show transitions from tundra to forest environments occurring within centuries, forcing dramatic shifts in animal populations and distribution. Human responses to these changes reveal a pattern of opportunistic exploitation that prioritized short-term resource extraction over long-term ecological stability. The expansion of forests during warmer periods eliminated the open grasslands where many large mammals had thrived, causing significant population declines among species like mammoths and giant ground sloths. Genetic studies of mammoth remains from Siberia show that their suitable habitat contracted by 89% as forests expanded. Rather than allowing these struggling populations to recover, humans intensified their hunting of the remaining animals. Archaeological evidence from sites like Stellmore in Germany, dating to around 14,000 years ago, shows how humans developed new hunting techniques specifically adapted to forested environments. The construction of artificial lake structures to funnel reindeer into killing zones demonstrates sophisticated understanding of animal behavior, combined with willingness to manipulate. The Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to glacial conditions around 12,900 years ago, created additional environmental stresses that might have encouraged conservation of remaining animal populations. Instead, archaeological evidence suggests that human communities responded by developing even more efficient hunting technologies and techniques. The refinement of projectile point technology during this period indicates that climate stress intensified rather than reduced human pressure on animal populations. The development of specialized Arctic hunting techniques during cold periods demonstrates how humans adapted their exploitation methods to changing conditions rather than reducing their environmental impact. Evidence from sites like Bluefish Caves in Canada shows that humans developed sophisticated techniques for hunting in extreme cold conditions, including the construction of semi-permanent hunting camps positioned to intercept migrating animal populations. The timing of megafauna extinctions correlates closely with periods of rapid climate change, but human hunting appears to have been the decisive factor in determining which species survived and which disappeared. Mathematical models of population dynamics during the Pleistocene-Holocene transition suggest that many large mammal species could have survived climate changes if they had not faced additional pressure from human hunting. The extinction of cave lions around 14,000 years ago provides a clear example of how human hunting pressure interacted with climate change to cause species loss. These apex predators had survived multiple previous climate fluctuations over hundreds of thousands of years, but their extinction coincides precisely with the expansion of human populations across Europe. Cut marks on cave lion bones from German and Belgian sites indicate that humans were actively hunting these dangerous predators rather than simply competing with them for resources. Regional variations in extinction patterns reveal how human hunting pressure affected different ecosystems during climate transitions. In North America, the extinction of horses around 10,000 years ago occurred despite suitable habitat remaining available, suggesting that human hunting was the primary cause. Similarly, the survival of bison population, human responses to the establishment of Holocene conditions around 11,700 years ago, reveal how climate stabilization enabled even more intensive animal exploitation. The warming climate and stabilizing sea levels created opportunities for human population expansion and technological development. But these advantages were used primarily to develop more sophisticated hunting techniques rather than more sustainable relationships with other species. The transition to smaller, more dispersed prey animals during the Holocene required humans to develop new hunting strategies, but the fundamental approach remained focused on maximizing animal mortality for human benefit. Archaeological evidence from the Mesolithic period shows development of specialized trapping techniques, improved projectile technology, and systematic exploitation of marine resources that maintained high levels of environmental pressure despite changing conditions. The brutal reality of food security. The pursuit of food security during the Stone Age drove early humans to develop increasingly brutal methods of animal exploitation that went far beyond the killing patterns seen in natural predation. Archaeological evidence reveals systematic practices designed not just to secure food, but to maximize the suffering and utilization of hunted animals, suggesting that human survival strategies incorporated calculated cruelty as a standard operating procedure. Persistence hunting represents perhaps the most psychologically disturbing aspect of early human food procurement. This technique, involving the systematic exhaustion of prey animals over hours or days of continuous pursuit, required hunters to repeatedly observe and ignore obvious signs of animal distress, fear, and suffering. Unlike natural predators that typically kill quickly to minimize energy expenditure and risk of injury, human persistence hunters deliberately prolonged the hunting process to exploit their unique physiological advantages. The practice of persistence hunting reveals troubling aspects of early human psychology that distinguish our species from other predators. Evidence suggests that successful persistence hunting required hunters to develop emotional detachment from animal suffering while maintaining intense focus on their prey's weakening condition. Ethnographic studies of contemporary persistence hunters indicate that archaeological evidence of drive hunting techniques shows how early humans developed methods that maximized animal mortality through coordinated group violence. Sites like Buffalo Jump in Alberta, Canada, preserve evidence of systematic cliff drives where entire herds of bison were stampeded to their deaths. The positioning of these kill sites indicates that humans specifically selected locations where animals would suffer maximum trauma from falls, ensuring death even for animals that survived the initial impact. The scale of prehistoric drive hunts reveals a level of animal exploitation that far exceeded immediate food needs. Archaeological investigations at the Olson-Chubbuck site in Colorado uncovered evidence of a single hunting event that killed over 200 bison around 8,000 years ago. Analysis of the bone deposits indicates that many animals were left to rot without being processed, suggesting that the killing had become more important than the actual food acquisition. Evidence of systematic scavenging practices during resource-scarce periods shows how early humans competed violently with other predators for access to animal carcasses. Cut marks on bones from sites across Africa and Europe indicate that humans often drove other predators away from their kills using weapons and fire, essentially committing robbery that resulted in starvation for the original predators. The development of food storage techniques using animal products demonstrates how humans began manipulating natural preservation processes to extend their exploitation of killed animals. Evidence from Arctic sites shows sophisticated understanding of how to use animal fat and intestines to preserve meat for extended periods, techniques that required detailed knowledge of decomposition processes and careful management of stored carcasses. Perhaps most disturbing is archaeological evidence of systematic cannibalism during periods of food scarcity, indicating that early humans had developed such efficient techniques for processing animal flesh that they readily applied these methods to members of their own species. The uniformity of butchery marks found on human and animal bones at sites like Gough's Cave suggests that humans had become so habituated to violence. The Gough's Cave cannibalism evidence is particularly revealing because it shows systematic processing rather than desperate consumption. Human skulls were carefully converted into drinking cups using the same techniques applied to animal bones, while other human bones show cut marks consistent with deliberate meat removal rather than hasty consumption. Radiocarbon dating places this evidence at 14,700 years ago, during a period when other food sources were available, suggesting that cannibalism had become a cultural practice rather than an emergency survival strategy. Additional evidence from El Cedron Cave in Spain reveals that Neanderthal cannibalism involved processing of family groups, including children. Genetic analysis indicates that some of the processed individuals were closely related, raising disturbing questions about how resource competition affected social bonds within early human communities. The systematic nature of the bone processing suggests that consuming other humans had become as routine as processing any other animal carcass. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites indicates that interpersonal violence became increasingly common during periods of resource scarcity, as human groups competed for access to animal populations. Trauma analysis of prehistoric skeletons reveals patterns of injury consistent with warfare using hunting weapons, indicating that the same tools developed for animal killing were routinely turned against other humans. The development of food storage and preservation techniques during the Stone Age reveals how human communities began manipulating animal carcasses to extract maximum utility from each kill. Evidence from sites across Europe shows sophisticated understanding of smoking, drying, and chemical preservation methods that required significant time investment and specialized knowledge. These techniques enabled human communities to kill animals in greater numbers during favorable hunting conditions and store the products for later consumption. Seasonal hunting patterns documented in archaeological sites reveal how early humans learned to exploit animal vulnerability during reproduction and migration periods. Evidence indicates that humans deliberately timed major hunting operations to coincide with calving seasons when adult females were less mobile and young animals were easy targets. This systematic exploitation of animal reproductive cycles had significant impacts on population recovery and contributed to the extinction of numerous species. The development of specialized killing tools designed to maximize animal suffering reveals disturbing aspects of early human technology development. Archaeological evidence shows projectile points designed with barbs that would prevent wounded animals from escaping while causing maximum tissue damage. Similarly, trap mechanisms were engineered to cause severe injuries that would immobilize animals without killing them immediately, keeping meat fresh while ensuring the prey could not escape. Evidence of systematic bone marrow extraction reveals how humans developed techniques for accessing every possible nutrient from killed animals. Sites across multiple continents contain evidence of bones that have been systematically cracked and processed to extract marrow, often requiring significant additional labor after the initial butchering process. This complete utilization of animal remains indicates that maximizing resource extraction had become more important than minimizing processing time or effort. Plant-based alternatives, the road not taken. Archaeological evidence reveals that Stone Age humans possessed extensive knowledge of plant-based nutrition and sophisticated processing techniques that could have sustained thriving communities without the systematic exploitation of animals. This evidence raises profound questions about the necessity of the brutal hunting practices that characterized early human development, and suggests that many of the most violent aspects of Stone Age animal exploitation represented choices rather than survival requirements. Coprolite analysis from sites across multiple continents provides direct evidence of early human plant consumption patterns that indicate sophisticated understanding of plant nutrition. Fossilized feces from Paisley Caves in Oregon, dating to 14,300 years ago, contain remains of dental calculus studies from Neanderthal remains at El Cedrón Cave in Spain, reveal consumption of yarrow and chamomile, plants with minimal nutritional value but significant medicinal properties. This evidence indicates that even Neanderthals possessed sophisticated knowledge of plant chemistry and therapeutic applications, suggesting that plant-based knowledge systems were well developed long before modern humans spread across the globe. Archaeological evidence from Ohala II, a 23,000-year-old site in Israel, demonstrates sophisticated plant processing technologies that would have made plant foods more digestible and nutritious. Grinding stones found at the site show evidence of wild cereal processing, indicating that early humans had developed techniques for converting raw plant materials into more concentrated and accessible forms of nutrition. The development of cooking technology, evidenced by controlled fire use at sites dating back 300,000 years, would have significantly improved the nutritional accessibility of plant foods for early human populations. Controlled cooking processes break down plant cell walls, reduce anti-nutrients, and increase bioavailability of essential nutrients. Evidence from sites like Qasem Cave in Israel shows that early humans were systematically roasting plant foods 400,000 years ago, indicating that the technology to make plant-based diets highly nutritious was available throughout most of the Stone Age. Isotopic analysis of early human bone collagen from various European sites reveals dietary patterns that included significant plant contributions during certain periods and regions. Studies from sites in southern Europe during interglacial periods show carbon isotope signatures consistent with substantial plant food consumption, indicating that hunter-gatherer communities successfully maintained themselves with reduced reliance on animal products when environmental conditions were favorable. The development of plant food storage technologies demonstrates that early humans possessed the knowledge to create stable plant-based food supplies that could sustain communities through seasonal scarcity. Evidence from late Pleistocene sites shows sophisticated granary structures and storage containers designed specifically for preserving plant foods over extended periods. These technologies indicate that ethnographic studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer societies provide insights into how plant-based knowledge systems could have supported Stone Age communities. Groups like the Kung of the Kalahari Desert derive 60 to 70% of their calories from plant sources, demonstrating that sophisticated plant-based subsistence strategies remain viable even in challenging environments. These modern examples suggest that prehistoric humans had access to similar strategies, but chose instead to prioritize animal exploitation. Archaeological evidence of plant cultivation activities dating to the late Pleistocene indicates that humans were beginning to manipulate plant ecosystems long before the formal development of agriculture. Sites in the Levant show evidence of wild cereal management and proto-agricultural activities around 15,000 years ago, suggesting that the transition away from animal-dependent lifestyles could have occurred much earlier in human history. The diversity of plant foods available to prehistoric humans far exceeded the number of large game species that became the focus of intensive hunting. Paleoecological reconstructions indicate that most environments occupied by early humans contained dozens of edible plant species that could have provided complete nutrition with appropriate processing and combination. This diversity would have provided more stable food supplies than relying on animal populations that were subject to climate fluctuations and overhunting. Evidence of specialized plant processing tools from various Stone Age sites indicates that some communities invested significant technological development in plant food utilization. Grinding stones, digging sticks, and plant fiber processing tools required considerable time and skill to manufacture, suggesting that plant-based knowledge systems received substantial cultural investment in some prehistoric societies. The seasonal availability of plant foods in most environments occupied by early humans would have allowed for sophisticated storage and preservation strategies that could have reduced or eliminated the need for winter hunting of large mammals. Evidence from Arctic sites shows that even in challenging northern environments, Early peoples had access to preserved berries, nuts, and other plant foods that could sustain communities during periods when fresh plant foods were unavailable. Nutritional analysis of wild plant foods available to prehistoric humans reveals that many species provided complete amino acid profiles and essential fatty acids traditionally associated with animal products. Wild seeds, nuts, and leafy greens contain all necessary nutrients for human health, suggesting that the commonly cited nutritional arguments for animal exploitation during the Stone Age may be less compelling than traditionally assumed. The energy efficiency of plant food procurement compared to hunting activities suggests that plant-based subsistence strategies would have required less time and energy expenditure per calorie acquired. Ethnographic data indicates that gathering activities typically provide higher caloric return per hour of labor investment compared to hunting, especially when success rates and processing time for animal products are considered. Archaeological evidence of trade networks for plant foods during the late Stone Age demonstrates that early human communities were capable of organizing complex distribution systems that could have supported specialized plant-based subsistence strategies. Evidence of exotic nuts, seeds, and other plant materials found far from their origin points indicates that prehistoric humans possessed the social organization necessary to maintain diverse plant-based diets through intergroup cooperation. The development of fermentation technologies for plant foods, evidenced by specialized containers and processing areas at various Stone Age sites, shows that early humans possessed sophisticated knowledge of how to improve plant food digestibility and nutritional content. These techniques would have made plant-based diets even more viable by increasing nutrient density and creating preserved foods with extended shelf life. The aesthetics of domination. Early animal art. The cave paintings and carved figurines created during the Upper Paleolithic period represent more than artistic achievement. They constitute humanity's first systematic program of ideological domination over other species. These images, found in sites like Lascaux, Altamira, and Chauvet caves, reveal how the famous Hall of Bulls at Lascaux, created around 17,000 years ago, features life-size depictions of aurochs, horses, and deer rendered with remarkable anatomical accuracy. However, these images weren't celebrations of animal beauty or expressions of kinship. They were ownership documents. By depicting animals on cave walls in spaces controlled by human communities, artists were making territorial claims over other species that extended beyond physical hunting grounds into the realm of symbolic possession. The positioning and context of these animal images reveals their function as tools of psychological domination. Many cave paintings are located in deep, difficult-to-access chambers that required significant effort and planning to reach. The investment of time and resources required to create these underground galleries suggests they served important cultural functions related to maintaining human supremacy narratives within communities. Analysis of painting techniques used in Paleolithic cave art shows that artists possessed detailed knowledge of animal anatomy, behavior, and vulnerability points. Many depictions emphasize features like exposed flanks, necks, and other areas targeted during hunting. This suggests the images served partly as instructional materials for hunters, transforming artistic expression into training tools for more efficient animal killing. The absence of natural environmental context in most animal cave paintings is significant. Animals are typically depicted in isolation against blank backgrounds, rather than in their natural habitats. This artistic choice reflects a conceptual framework that viewed animals as objects, removed from their ecological contexts, and defined primarily by their utility to humans. The Chauvet cave paintings, dating to around 30,000 years ago, feature striking images of large predators like lions and bears that reveal complex psychological relationships between early humans and dangerous animals. Rather than depicting these animals as threats to be avoided, the paintings portray them as conquered subjects, trophies of human intellectual and technological superiority over nature's most formidable creatures. Carved figurines and portable art objects from the same period extend the themes of animal domination into everyday material culture. Symbols of animal domination with them, extending ideological control beyond fixed cave painting sites. The use of animal parts in creating artistic tools reveals another layer of symbolic domination. Bone needles, carved antlers, and pigment containers made from animal remains transformed the physical components of killed animals into instruments for creating human cultural expression. This repurposing represents a complete appropriation of animal bodies for human aesthetic purposes. Evidence suggests that cave painting activities may have been associated with hunting ritual practices designed to ensure successful kills. The discovery of stone projectile points embedded in some painted animal figures indicates that caves may have served as sites where hunters practiced their aim, while simultaneously reinforcing cultural narratives about human dominance over their prey. The sophisticated understanding of animal psychology revealed in cave art indicates that early artists had studied their subjects extensively, not to appreciate them as fellow beings, but to better exploit their weaknesses. Paintings often capture moments of animal vulnerability, drinking at water sources, caring for young, or in positions that would make them easy targets for human hunters. The communal nature of cave painting activities, evidenced by multiple handprints and collaborative artistic techniques, suggests that creating animal imagery was a social activity that reinforced group identity through shared participation in symbolic animal domination. These collaborative artistic sessions would have strengthened community bonds while simultaneously normalizing violence against other species. Archaeological evidence indicates that some cave painting sites were used repeatedly over centuries, with new images added to existing galleries. This continuity suggests that animal domination imagery served ongoing cultural functions related to maintaining and transmitting ideological frameworks across generations. Young community members would have been brought to these sites to learn not just hunting techniques, but worldviews that positioned humans as rightful masters of other species. The technical sophistication required to create many cave paintings, including the use of perspective, shading, and anatomical accuracy, indicates that considerable cultural resources were devoted to perfecting animal domination imagery. This investment of time and skill suggests that symbolic control over animals was considered as important as physical hunting activities. The selective representation of certain animal species in cave art reveals deliberate choices about which animals were considered appropriate subjects for artistic domination. Large, impressive mammals feature prominently, while smaller prey animals and plant foods are largely absent. This selection pattern reinforces cultural hierarchies that valued domination over powerful animals while diminishing the importance of alternative food sources. The first slaves, understanding domestication. Around 30,000 years ago, early humans initiated what historians romantically call domestication, a process more accurately understood as the systematic genetic manipulation and behavioral control of other species for human benefit. The transformation of wolves into dogs represents humanity's first successful experiment in biological colonization, establishing patterns of interspecies exploitation that continue to define human-animal relationships today. The process began not with affection or mutual benefit, but with calculated manipulation. Early humans observed that wolves following human camps for food scraps gradually became less fearful and more dependent on human provisioning. Rather than maintaining respectful distance or partnership, humans began deliberately selecting which wolves received food, effectively controlling reproduction by determining which animals survived to breeding age. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites across Europe and Asia reveals systematic changes in wolf skeletal remains that indicate intensive human selection pressure. Skull measurements show progressive reduction in brain size, shortening of snouts, and changes in tooth configuration that parallel the physical modifications seen in juvenile wolves. Humans were essentially breeding wolves to maintain childlike characteristics throughout their adult lives, a process that guaranteed psychological and physical dependence. The famous von Oberkassel dog, buried alongside two humans 14,000. Rather than demonstrating affection, this evidence suggests that early humans had developed such sophisticated techniques for controlling animal behavior that they were willing to invest significant resources in maintaining sick animals that served their purposes. The burial with humans likely represents ownership continuity into death rather than emotional attachment, a practice of transporting property into the afterlife. Genetic analysis of ancient dog remains reveals that domestication occurred through severe population bottlenecks that dramatically reduced genetic diversity. Modern dogs share fewer genetic variants than wolves, despite being derived from wolf populations, indicating that early humans systematically eliminated genetic lines that didn't serve human purposes. This genetic colonization created animals that were physically and behaviorally dependent on humans for survival. The development of distinct dog breeds during the Stone Age shows how quickly humans learned to manipulate animal genetics for specific purposes. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe reveals dogs with different skeletal characteristics suggesting specialization for hunting, guarding, and companionship roles. This diversification indicates that early humans understood principles of selective breeding and applied them systematically to create living tools designed for different functions. The expansion of domestication to other species followed similar patterns of manipulation and control. Goats and sheep, domesticated in the Fertile Crescent around 10,000 to 8,000 years ago, underwent systematic genetic and behavioral modifications that made them completely dependent on human management. Wild goats and sheep are agile, intelligent animals capable of surviving in challenging mountainous environments. Their domesticated descendants became docile, slow-moving creatures that require human protection to survive. Archaeological evidence from early agricultural sites like Çatalhöyük reveals sophisticated animal management systems that prioritized human convenience over animal welfare. Livestock were housed in structures that restricted movement, controlled breeding, and facilitated easy slaughter. These early animal management for pig domestication presents particularly clear evidence of genetic manipulation for human purposes. Wild boars are intelligent, social animals with complex behavioral repertoires and strong family bonds. Archaeological remains from early domestic pig sites show systematic changes in skull shape, body size, and social behavior that indicate intensive human selection for docility, rapid growth, and reduced intelligence. The development of dairying represents another escalation in animal exploitation that transformed female mammals into permanent milk production machines. Evidence from sites like Çatalhöyük shows that humans had learned to manipulate animal reproductive cycles to maximize milk production, keeping female animals in permanent states of pregnancy and lactation. This practice required detailed knowledge of animal reproductive physiology, combined with willingness to impose continuous physiological stress on other species. The use of animals for labor, evidenced by yoke marks on cattle bones from early agricultural sites, represents the transformation of living beings into mechanical devices. Unlike modern machines, these biological tools required food, water, and maintenance, while providing inconsistent performance. The choice to use animals for labor, rather than developing alternative technologies, indicates that controlling other species had become more important than technical efficiency. Early breeding practices systematically eliminated natural behaviors that interfered with human goals. Archaeological evidence shows progressive reduction in flight responses, territorial behaviors, and parental instincts among domestic animals. These changes weren't accidental, but resulted from deliberate selection against animals that retained wild behavioral characteristics. The development of animal ownership concepts during the early domestication period established legal and social frameworks that defined living beings as property. Archaeological evidence of animal burial with grave goods and inheritance practices indicates that early human societies had developed sophisticated systems for treating other species as possessions that could be owned, traded, and transferred between humans. The isolation of domestic animals from wild populations prevented genetic exchange that might have restored natural behavioral traits. Early farmers constructed the brutality of survival. The most disturbing evidence of Stone Age animal exploitation lies not in systematic hunting or domestication practices, but in the documented instances where early humans turned their efficient killing techniques against members of their own species. Archaeological sites across multiple continents preserve evidence of cannibalism that reveals the psychological framework early humans had developed for processing living beings as resources rather than as fellow creatures deserving moral consideration. The systematic nature of prehistoric cannibalism indicates that early humans had become so habituated to violence against living beings that species boundaries became irrelevant during resource competition. At Gough's Cave in England, human remains dating to 14,700 years ago show processing techniques identical to those used on animal carcasses at the same site. Cut marks indicate systematic flesh removal, bone marrow extraction, and skull processing that required the same tools and techniques developed for animal butchery. The conversion of human skulls into drinking cups at Gough's Cave represents perhaps the most psychologically disturbing evidence of Stone Age exploitation attitudes. These weren't desperate acts of starvation, but deliberate cultural practices that treated human heads as raw materials for tool creation. The precision of the skull cup manufacturing, involving careful removal of facial bones and smoothing of drinking edges, indicates skilled craftswork that required significant time investment and planning. Evidence from El Sidrón Cave in Spain reveals that Neanderthal cannibalism involved processing of family groups, including children and close genetic relatives. DNA analysis indicates that some of the consumed individuals shared significant genetic relationships, suggesting that resource pressure could override the strongest social bonds within early human communities. The systematic processing of these remains, using techniques developed for animal butchery, indicates that consuming other humans had become as routine as hunting any other prey species. The timing of cannibalistic episodes correlates with periods of environmental stress, but archaeological evidence suggests that other food sources remained available during these events. Plant remains and animal bones from the same sites indicate that cannibalism occurred alongside continued hunting and gathering activities rather than replacing them. This pattern suggests that consuming other humans represented a cultural choice rather than desperate starvation, indicating that early human violence against living beings had become normalized to an extraordinary degree. Archaeological evidence of trauma on human skeletons from Stone Age sites reveals patterns of interpersonal violence using hunting weapons, indicating that the same tools developed for animal exploitation were routinely turned against other humans during resource competition. Spear points embedded in human bones, skull fractures consistent with club impacts, and defensive wounds on arm bones show that early human communities regularly engaged in lethal violence over access to resources and territory. The development of specialized weapons designed specifically for human combat during the Stone Age indicates that violence against other humans had become systematic enough to drive technological innovation. Archaeological sites contain evidence of maces, daggers, and other weapons that would have been ineffective for hunting animals, but highly effective for human combat. This technological specialization suggests that interspecies violence had expanded to include systematic intraspecies warfare. Evidence of torture and mutilation practices associated with Stone Age violence reveals psychological frameworks that prioritized inflicting suffering over achieving quick kills. The scale of violence revealed in some Stone Age sites indicates that early human communities were capable of organizing systematic extermination campaigns against neighboring groups. Mass grave sites containing dozens of individuals with trauma patterns consistent with organized violence suggest that early humans had developed military strategies and group coordination techniques specifically for large-scale killing operations. Archaeological evidence of trophy-taking practices, including the systematic removal of scalps, heads, and other body parts from killed enemies, indicates that early humans had developed cultural frameworks that celebrated violence against other humans. These practices required post-mortem processing techniques similar to those used for animal remains, further demonstrating how violence against living beings had become culturally normalized. The preservation of weapons and tools used for human killing in prestigious burial contexts indicates that early human societies accorded high status to individuals skilled in violence against other humans. This cultural valorization of interpersonal violence reinforced social structures that rewarded those most effective at causing suffering to other living beings. Evidence of systematic enslavement practices during the late Stone Age, including the capture and forced labor of individuals from other communities, indicates that early humans had developed sophisticated techniques for controlling other humans that paralleled their domestication techniques for animals. These practices represent extensions of the same psychological frameworks that enabled systematic animal exploitation. The development of ritual practices involving human sacrifice during transitional periods between Stone Age and agricultural societies shows how violence against humans became incorporated into spiritual and cultural frameworks. Archaeological evidence of deliberately killed individuals associated with ceremonial contexts indicates that taking human life had become culturally sanctified in some early human communities. The original sin. As Kayla's mammoth calf finally stopped struggling in the mud pit 20,000 years ago, more than one life ended. The patterns established during the Stone Age created the psychological and cultural frameworks that continue to justify animal exploitation today. Every factory farm, every medical laboratory, every zoo traces its moral lineage back to those first systematic hunting campaigns that treated animals as resources rather than fellow beings. The spiritual justifications, the technological innovations, and the cultural celebrations of interspecies dominance all emerged from Stone Age practices that normalized violence against other species. Perhaps most troubling is the evidence that this trajectory wasn't inevitable. Early humans possessed sophisticated knowledge of plant nutrition, cooking techniques, and food preservation that could have supported thriving communities without systematic animal exploitation. The choice to prioritize hunting over gathering, domestication over partnership, and dominance over coexistence reveals something fundamental about human nature that we continue to confront today. The mammoth extinctions, the systematic slaughter at sites like Salutre, the conversion of wolves into genetic prisoners. These weren't unfortunate necessities of human survival. They were conscious choices made by intelligent beings who understood the consequences of their actions and proceeded anyway. The Stone Age represents humanity's decision to prioritize our own interests over the welfare of every other species, establishing a moral framework that continues to shape our world. As we face contemporary crises of mass extinction, climate change, and ecological collapse, the Stone Age offers sobering lessons about human nature and our capacity for systematic violence against other forms of life. The technologies have changed, but the underlying attitudes developed 20,000 years ago persist. Other species exist primarily to serve human needs. Their suffering is irrelevant compared to human convenience, and our dominance over them is both natural and justified. The archaeological record shows that we became human not through cooperation or intelligence alone, but through our willingness to transform every other living being into a resource for human consumption. This